Welcome to Surf Fishing 101. In this episode, we're going to be discussing how to pick the right size of reel for the way you fish. We have Craig Cantelmo, who's a national sales rep for Staal, and one of the guys that has a lot to say about how the reels are designed. And although he fishes with his own stuff, and that's what he does for a living, he's very well aware of all the brands and all the sizes and everything else that comes into play when it comes to getting a guide the right size reel. So how do you, you have small reels. The industry kind of runs on the numbers from 2,000 or 1,000 to 10,000.
Right, everyone's got their own nomenclature.
Everybody's got their own sizes. Yes, you have your own. But for what we do in the Northeast, and that's primarily what we do these videos for, anywhere between 4,500 for really light tackle like fluke fishing from shore and stuff to 7,500, 6,500, which would be yours, anywhere from 200 to 300 serious right, reels. How do you pick a reel? What is the most important thing to look at it if you are going to buy a reel? And doesn't matter which brand it is. Is it where you fish? Is it the rod that you own and you're going to buy? Is it trying to match with these new rods which are lighter than anything what we've done before? Like, how do you go about picking the right size reel?
It's a great question, and there's a lot of things that go into choosing the right size reel. The first one I would say is what rod's it going to go on. So if you what rod you're going to choose is going to be where you're going to spend most of your time fishing. So here we are in the North Fork of Long Island today. A 9-foot rod with a VS 150 or a 4,000 size reel is going to be ideal, and it's not because you're not going to have an opportunity of catching big fish, but it's because most of what you're going to be throwing is going to be lighter. So it's all about presentation. So if you're using lighter presentations where you throw in SP minnows and soft plastics and things like that, you want to have a rod and a reel combo that's going to give you the sensitivity and the presentation that's going to catch more fish. If you were to come here and throw a 275 on a 11-foot lammy and you're going to throw Ronzis or Hoagies, you're not going to be as successful because the presentation to the fish is not going to be as good because you're not going to be able to feel it. So the whole idea is to match your reel with the rod and the lures that you're going to present to. So that's going to be where you're fishing. So it's good to have a good understanding about where you're going to fish with that setup. Obviously, if you go to Montauk during a nor'easter, you want to have an 11-foot with a 275 or a heavy 10 with the VS 250. That's going to give you a better chance of presenting those lures and jigs that's going to be required to fish that bigger water.
Right, because if you're in a nor'easter and you're using a big rod, which you probably will have to, casting into 30 miles an hour wind in your face, you're not going to get away with a 7-foot rod. You're going to have to go with 10, 11-foot rod. So now, to match that rod, you could put a 4,500 reel, which will cast about 20 feet because the way the line's going to come off and design of the guides. And not only that, you don't have a lot of line and you're not going to be able to get your lure in a position. So
you're right. So you just hit something that's very important, is that the diameter of the spool with the size of that rod, because you have to overcome the distance between the reel seat and the tip. So if you have a 100, you put it on an 11-foot rod, you're going to be fishing that reel like this the entire time. When you put a 275 on it, which is that 40, 42 inches per turn, you're going to have a nice comfortable cadence where you're going to feel the lure.
Right,
okay?
and you really can't crank like an idiot and trying to get feel for what your bucktail is doing if you're trying to work.
Yeah, because you're always trying to catch up to feel that. So it really depends on what the conditions are going to be and what presentations you're going to make. And the other thing is weight. When you look at matching that reel to the rod, you want to make sure that you balance that rod. And there's a lot of guys that were putting some very light reels on longer rods. That was the push the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
And the rods have now gotten so light that we're capable of doing some really neat things that we'll talk about. But the lighter reel on a heavy rod creates issues by the end of the season, like tennis elbow, and your shoulder starts to hurt. So it's important that you match that reel that you're going to use to the rod you're going to fish with.
Yeah, so the balance is important. It's not only, on the end of the day, you got to be comfortable. I mean, if you're going to do this, you got to enjoy yourself, you got to be comfortable. If you put a heavy reel on a very light rod or short rod, it's going to be tip heavy too when you cast.
Absolutely.
Right, you make a cast that the whole reel wants to kind of, so you gotta match basically to the lures that you use, and to the conditions that you face, and to the places that you fish. So there's no sense in getting 11-foot rod and throwing a half an ounce bucktails. You're not going to be able, like you said, you're not going to be able to get the presentation. Even if you get their lure there, the whole setup will not allow you to feel what you really wanted to accomplish. Is to get their light action. That's, when you see a guy fishing a 9-foot noodle stick, he's doing it for a reason. He's throwing that half an ounce bucktail in the wash in Montauk for a reason.
Sure.
You try, you come with a, you see him catch fish, and you come with your GSP, and you put a 1/4 ounce bucktail, and you don't even know what a bucktail is, because you can't even feel that rod, can't even feel it.
Yeah.
So there's a rhyme and reason for everything. So when you pick your own reel, make sure you take all these things in consideration.